We have one of our most favorite guests back today, as you know. Hello, Leah.
Hello, ladies. It is so great to be here again.
So great to have you.
I think you should just hang out with us always, okay? Just, let's just hang out in this virtual room.
I'm so happy with that.
We want to shift gears a little bit in terms of the perspective of the conversation that we've spoken about. For those of you who haven't listened to our previous conversation with Leah, make sure you go and check that out. We'll put links in show notes. And we really talked about this steering through the storm. Oh, little name drop for your book there as well. We'll put that in the show notes. Steering through the storm, leading your team through change. We had really robust, wonderful conversation around that with some excellent frameworks. But today we're going to shift that perspective, that focus on ourselves, because as leaders, as business owners, as business leaders, there is always an element of uncertainty that we need to deal with in our business. Business is a roller coaster at times. And there's also then the uncertainty of the market or the uncertainty of the world. And my gosh, the last 3-4 years has really been evident of that. But that will always be there, this element of uncertainty. And so what I would love to start the conversation today, Leah, is around this piece of we need to still step into self-leadership. We need to be able to show up for, our people or our families or the people around us and ourselves. And I would love to pick your brain on how we do that when we ourselves are perhaps feeling a little rattled, a little uncertain.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are so spot on. Whether you are a people leader or you're just dealing with challenge and change and uncertainty yourself. And really, essentially, I'm saying everyone listening, because there is so much going on for all of us. Everyone has challenges in their life, whether it's personal or professional. And I think when things get a bit wobbly, sometimes we can forget that there are things we can do to lead ourselves through the storm. And I'm excited for this conversation today for the leaders listening. As Nicky just suggested, you cannot lead other people unless you first lead yourself. It is as simple as that. But for those who aren't people leaders, I think when things get tough, we often can fall into that trap of thinking, oh, it's all happening to us and there's nothing I can do here. And when we get into that space, we can be reacting and behaving in ways that are really out of alignment to the sort of person we want to be. So this conversation today is really about, what can we do? What can we do regardless of what's going on around us?
100%. I really relate to that. I wrote it down because it's sort of like, I think there is a big difference in how you approach the world and actually how you deal with the stresses in your life. If your belief set is that everything external to you makes you feel a certain way, and let's face it, sometimes that's it just does feel like that. It gets heavy and there's a lot going on. But the ability to empower yourself to shift that perspective into, actually, there's some things within my control and how I'm responding and reacting is within my control. But that actually sometimes is hard to hear because it takes responsibility and accountability.
And it is really hard to hear. And before we get into the conversation anymore, I just want to preface this by saying this is not a conversation. Self-leadership, first off, it's not some airy-fairy concept. It's not some nice to have, but it's also not saying you have to be holding it together all the time. And that you're not allowed to feel. I think sometimes the messaging around resilience and being, strong through uncertainty and challenge and change can lead us to believe that, so we're not meant to show any emotion and we're not meant to have a bad day and come on, everything's okay, and toxic positivity and all of those things. Just to be really clear, that is not what we are talking about here, because if you do not let yourself feel the emotions, you'll get stuck. Actually allowing yourself to feel and process emotions is really important.
Oh, yeah.
So true.
And that's healthy. We often talk about, instead of, say, being positive, which positive implies this band-aid, always have to smile and da, 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 da. It's like, oh, please. No, what we want instead is resourceful. We want a resourceful approach to things. And by allowing ourselves to be human, we move through whatever it is that we're going through. And I think, again, this is a bit of a theme that's come up in a few podcast episodes in different ways, but it also gives permission. It gives permission for people to be human or to feel as well. So what is that line, Leah? How do we be human, feel, be vulnerable perhaps? That's a big part of leadership, without it being negatively impacting, say, the people around us. Or what is that line where it's still professional, it's still resourceful in the workplace?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. And I would say one of the key things, if I was looking at self-leadership and, how do we show up as fully human, even to backtrack a little bit, where I'd be encouraging listeners to start, and I think we did mention this in the last podcast, but gosh, it's worth saying again, is the very first thing I want you to do, listeners, is to ask yourself what you want to be known for as you're navigating whatever challenge it is you're facing. It might be what you want to be known for in general, as a parent, in the workplace, whatever that might be. But it might be you've got a specific challenge or change coming up, or a project that you're working on, and getting really clear on what you want to be known for through that. Because once you get really clear on that, and it has to speak to you, that can be your touchstone and your true north when things get wobbly. So that will help you when you're making decisions, when you're self-leading, go, for example, if kindness is one of them, that will allow you to go, oh, I just want to react and yell at this person, but hang on, who do I want to be right now? I want to be someone who is kind. That would not be what I do here. So it's getting really clear on who you want to be. And then the second step, and this is a harder one, is acknowledging where you're at and asking yourself some really tough questions. So and this can be hard, and I encourage listeners to write these down and don't just think about them while you're listening to the podcast, like really do some deep thinking on this. Questions like, what's it like to be around me? And that's a hard one. How am I traveling really? Am I modeling the behavior I want to see in other people? Now, there's a little tool that I often use here when we're talking about emotions and how we show up. And I'm happy to share it so that it's in the show notes. And it's called the emotional word wheel, because there's some great research that Brené Brown did for her most recent book, Atlas of the Heart, which found that when we're asked how we are, most of us have a very limited emotional vocabulary. And we can pick a couple of words and, happy, sad, scared, and that's kind of it. And, some of us don't even pick a feeling. We say good. How are you?
Or busy.
Not an emotion.
Right? How are you? Busy. That's a common one too.
Exactly. So this word wheel has got 130 different feelings and emotions on it. And I love to use this as a tool personally as well, to ask myself, how do I feel really? If I had to, and I asked myself, if I had to pick 2 words, the more specific and granular, the better, about how I'm feeling, what would they be? And the reason that this is important is because if you can name it, you can process and work through it. And I'll give you a quick example of this, again, going back to your original question of how do we show up. I had a woman in a workshop recently, and I said, how are you traveling really? And she said, I'm really angry. I am just so angry. And I said, all right. And here's the important thing. There's no bad emotions. Emotions are data about how we're feeling. But I said to her, I want you to reflect on this. Are you really angry, or are you actually feeling something else? And anger's what you're showing. And where she came to was words like disrespected and disillusioned. Right? Now, different conversation. conversation. So yes, there's the acknowledging where we're at in terms of how we show up and be vulnerable. So if you know what you want to be known for and can acknowledge where you're at, straight away, you're going to see what the gap is.
Yep.
And there'll always be a gap, right? I have not yet met someone who can say, this is what I want to be known for, and 100% of the time I am that person. But this will help you recognize, how am I showing up? Are there some adjustments to make? In terms of knowing where the line is, there is no one line. Sorry, everyone. There's no just a hard
I tried.
to what the line is. But this misguided belief that emotions don't belong in the workplace, we don't do feelings at work. That would be great if humans weren't emotion-driven beings, but we are. We have to be allowed to express our emotions. And I think we spoke last time about that little framework of what's okay, what's not okay.
Yeah.
Apply it to yourself as well when it comes to self-leadership, right? It's okay to be angry. It's how you express that anger at work that is what we need to regulate. Okay, so you're allowed to feel the emotion. And what I would encourage you to do is look at putting words to it, not in the heat of the moment. Put words and articulate how you're feeling rather than just express it in an unregulated way. So it's okay to say, you know what, and maybe to your team, you know what, I am really frustrated at the moment, and here's why. That is way better than just having no tolerance for your team because you are frustrated and not having the conversation and letting it show. So much of what I'm talking about when I'm talking self-leadership is thinking about the proactive conversations that you need to have.
And as you're saying that, what's resonating with me is I'm somebody who I need to process things. I need to understand how I feel. And so that's something I'm reasonably comfortable with. I love the word will. I used to have that sitting right on my desk in my old workplace.
Yeah.
But it's a reminder to go back to that, because sometimes it's hard to put a finger on it and articulate it. But when you see a lot like anger, I think from memory, it sort of then opens up to broader states of emotion. And then again, so you can actually drill down, like you were saying, disrespected. And so that's actually what it's about, not the surface level.
Yes.
So that part I'm comfortable with. Well, reasonably comfortable with. What I find more challenging is articulating that to others.
Yeah.
And I think that when I sort of think about circumstances where I've got to talk about how I feel because it's impacting others around me, or potentially my emotions are high and that could impact how I show up. Without the ability, for me, it comes about in the ability to process it so I understand it. But then there's still this I don't know what it's, a fear or there's something in the next step that feels scary around telling people. It must be vulnerability, right?
Bingo, you took the word out of my mouth. I was like, it's scary because it takes real courage, because it requires being vulnerable. And depending on the environment and the relationships you have with your team, that can be terrifying or a bit nerve-wracking. But gosh, it's worth it if you can get there with the team, because the psychological safety it creates as well, when you can do that, is so powerful. And, talking self-leadership, if you can name it, yes, to other people, great if you can. But here's the thing, when we're talking self-leadership, sometimes naming it to yourself is enough. Because you can then, this is self-leadership, right? If you can name it to yourself, which, let's be frank, a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
Let's bury it down, pretend it doesn't exist. I'll be yelling at everyone because there's some underlying thing going on, but I'm too scared to even face up to that myself. But if we are willing to get vulnerable with ourselves, even if you're not comfortable sharing it, if you can realize, the reason I'm so angry all the time at the moment is because I'm feeling disrespected and stifled, then it might be the impetus to go, there are some conversations I have to have here, because it's not fair for me to be taking it out on everyone around me.
Because then it doesn't tie back to who you want to be as a person, as a leader, as a mother, as a wife, and whatever it is.
Yeah, spot on. And that's why you have to start there. If you're not clear on who you want to be, you can just so easily end up spiraling off elsewhere. So knowing who you want to be and making a choice about that, acknowledging where you're at, being brutally honest with that. And I always say to people, the challenge here is not to go on the shame spiral or the self-loathing spiral. This is about just going, I am human, dealing with a lot of stuff at the moment. This is not a beat myself up moment. This is just really trying to sit with, if I had to pick one of these words, what is it? What is it like to be around me? Let's just try to drop the guard and be as honest with ourselves as we can. The next thing I'd love to talk about there is the importance of training our brain, because self-leadership doesn't magically happen. It's not something that just happens for us.
Wake up one morning and that's it.
Yeah,
I'm a great self-leader.
It does not happen like that. And there's two models that I love using, and I will share these because they were game changers in my life and have been for so many listeners, and I'll share a story around this as well. But the first one's an old model. It's called the dreaded drama triangle. A guy called Stephen Cartman came up with that in the 1960s. It said lots of people under pressure respond or react from a position in the dreaded drama triangle, don't even know it, but it will absolutely impact your ability to show up well under challenge and change. First position is victim. And when we're in victim mode, we say things like this: poor me. Why does bad stuff always happen to me? Life's not fair. And we feel like our dreams are lost and denied. Everything's happening to us, and we focus on all the problems. And of course, because we focus on all the problems, that's all we see.
Mm-hmm.
Second position is persecutor. Some people through challenge and change go to that space, which is where we usually started off as a victim. Now we're angry. And we just want to tear other people down, and we want someone to blame and finger point, and it needs to be someone else's fault. The third position in the drama triangle, where I suspect there might be some listeners who fall into this one. I know I can fall into this one. Be interested to hear from you ladies as well. It's rescuer.
Oh,
I know, right? And rescuer says things like this: for you. Let me save the day. Let me do it for you. Fly in with my superwoman cape on, make everything better, because I don't want you to feel like a victim. So if you do this under pressure, you're not good at delegating if you're a leader. You're jumping in and doing things for people, and you're getting overloaded. So you were already stressed, but now you're doing it for everyone else to try to save the day. And here's the thing: you keep the victim in victim mode and create a codependent relationship. Okay. So the victims, sorry?
That's a lose-lose.
It's lose-lose, but it's so well-intentioned.
Yeah.
Those of us who are the nurturers, who want to help people and jump in and do it for them, but all it does is it keeps that victim in victim mode. It doesn't help them, as you said, Nicky, Ness, lose-lose, and we burn out. So when we're in this triangle, it means that things are happening to us. So you're in the middle of challenge and change, personal or professional, going, well, this is unfair. And, I feel crap about it. And it doesn't change your situation or circumstance showing up from one of those positions, but it makes you feel like crap, right? So the alternative to this is called the empowerment dynamic, and it was created by a guy called David Emerald, an American guy. He's got a great book on it called The Power of TED, which stands for the empowerment dynamic, written like a fable, a bit like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Really great book. And what he says is the drama triangle sucks. Like I said, it makes us feel like rubbish, but a lot of us live there. Why do so many of us through challenge and change show up from the drama triangle? Because it's easier. Because then we don't have to take personal responsibility. We can blame other people for our situation, which might feel good in the moment, but we get stuck. We just end up stuck and miserable and resentful and in a really dark place. So the alternative is the empowerment dynamic. In this, I'll run through it really quickly. The opposite to a victim is a creator. The opposite to a persecutor is a challenger. We need those people in the workplace, people who say, could we do it differently? Just because we've always done it that way, is there a better way? And the opposite to a rescuer is a coach, the person who is absolutely there to support their team, who will teach and empower their people, but understands I can't do it for them. Yep. And it's one of the hardest life lessons, right? You can't help someone who won't help themselves. You can support and assist, you can't do it for them. But I want to come back quickly to the creator, how it differs to a victim. The creator is not Pollyanna. They are not saying every day is a good day, just smile and be positive. The creator is saying this: bad things happen to good people all the time. Life is not fair. In fact, sometimes it bloody sucks. But in the middle of all of that, we have a choice. We have a choice to take personal responsibility for how we respond, no matter how hard or difficult it gets. And this draws on the work of Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor who wrote an incredible book called Man's Search for Meaning in the 1940s. And in that book, he says this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the power to choose our response in any given set of circumstances, to choose our own way. When we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I get goosebumps every time I say that.
Wow.
He wrote that after 3 years in Auschwitz. His whole family was killed by the Nazis. And he said, and it's an incredible book if you can get your hands on it, Man's Search for Meaning. He said, the last thing you can take from me is my power to choose my response. Yeah. You don't get. So how often do we give our power away to other people when things get hard, rather than go, no, I get to choose how I respond here. It doesn't mean every day is a good day and that you don't have your moments, but I get to choose. And this framework has got me through some of the most challenging times in my life. And I want to share with you just briefly the story of a woman, and I won't name her, but I do name her in my new book, Steer Through the Storm. I trained her in those models in 2019, and she responded to them at the time, but she actually reached out to me at the start of last year, 2022. And she reached out and she said, Leah, I want to update you on the last couple of years for me, and I want to let you know how I've used these models to help me lead myself through a really challenging time. Now, really challenging time's an understatement. This woman went into hospital during COVID for a relatively minor procedure on her leg. Unfortunately, that minor procedure, being in hospital, her leg got infected with a superbug and she actually got golden staph. And when she emailed me in March last year, March 2022, she said, and it's still, it almost, I get emotional talking about it because she's an incredible woman. She runs a disability support service here in Gippsland. She actually had her leg amputated during COVID. You can imagine what happened there. And then when she emailed me last year, she just had her second leg amputated. Wow. She had a bilateral amputation. So she's now a woman, a CEO of a business, and she's lost both of her legs. And in this email, she said, the thing I am coming back to again and again is those triangles, the dreaded drama triangle and the empowerment dynamic. And she said, don't get me wrong, I've been to some really dark places over the last few months, but the thing that is keeping me going is reminding myself that I get to choose how I respond now. Because here's the thing, They were taking my legs whether I liked it or not. I did not have a choice over that. But I get to choose what next. I get to choose where to from here. And I just want listeners to think about the choices they're making in, hopefully much less dramatic circumstances than that.
Yeah.
When challenges happen, what's your choice? What can you control? What can you influence? What conversations can you have? And then what do you need to let go of? And that's, of course, drawing on Covey's circles of influence. But it's such an important reminder to go at a time when I may not feel powerful. I might feel powerless, actually.
Yeah.
It's all happening to me and around me. We have to remind ourselves that at those times when we feel powerless, we are actually powerful. We get to choose how we respond.
Wow. That's that gave me goosebumps, that story. And it is so empowering to hear that somebody going through that, and even the Viktor Frankl, his book and his message, it really does put things back into perspective. And we started the conversation talking about, sometimes we just feel like the world happens to us and we don't have control over it. So I feel like this has been such an important conversation and a really great, I guess, a circuit breaker perhaps for some around how they're viewing their responsibility or their ability to be able to feel back in control of their response. So we could talk forever on this. How do we always say that when we speak to you, Leah?
Sorry.
It's amazing.
Right.
Thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. But to sort of bring this full circle, and I'm sitting here going, what's the cycle? What's the tangible action that someone who's listening, who really resonates with this conversation today, and you've given them so many ideas and resources within your not sharing your knowledge. But if there's an action for someone to take in the next 24 hours, what's the first simple step to break this cycle where you feel like everything is happening to you and you want to step into this self-leadership, but you're not sure what the first step is?
Yeah. So I'm going to be cheeky and give you 3 steps in one. Okay. Right? Because it's
That's
3
allowed.
actions to do, but you can absolutely do it within 24 hours. You can, I promise you. And it is doing that thing. What do I want to be known for? How do I want to show up through whatever this challenge is that I'm facing? Like, get real with yourself. What sort of person do you want to be? Number 2, you have to acknowledge where you're at. You have to be like, the reality is, folks, you can have every tool in your toolkit, but if you don't get honest with yourself about where you're at and how you're showing up, if you don't dig deep and be prepared to face up to that hard stuff, you won't put them into practice. Because you won't think you have to, right? So acknowledge where you're at as number 2. And the third one is choose your response. I want people thinking about those positions in the triangle. Am I choosing my response? Okay, so what do I want to be known for? Acknowledge where you're at. What's your next step? And I can't answer that for you, folks. That is you asking yourself. And what I would just encourage you to do as we finish off, don't try to change it all. That's a recipe for doing nothing. Okay, just pick a baby step. A baby step. If it is that you realize, oh gosh, I've been totally in victim mode. Okay, acknowledge where you're at. And then it's making that baby step choice of how can I show up differently in this conversation, in this moment.
Love it.
So powerful. And thank you for sharing all those frameworks and stories. And I'm going to pick up, that book is on my bookshelf. I loved it. I'm going to read it again. I also want to add one final thing around this, because what powerful questions, and even that example where you said, I want to be known for kindness as an example, as a kind leader. Make sure you put the mirror on yourself as well as on others in all of these questions, and incredibly powerful, thought-provoking questions Leah's shared. Yes, think about it for others. And the whole point of this is think about it for self, because you can be kind to others and not kind to self, or, you know, you can all of that. So it's such a good exercise to turn that mirror on ourselves as well. Thank you so much, Leah, for joining us again.
Yeah.
And just as a reminder, where can people follow you, find you? Again, I like to say friendly stalk you, you know, grow our community.
Open for friendly stalking, absolutely. Look, probably the easiest way is just to plug my name, Leah Metha, into Google. I'm on all the usual socials. I've got a YouTube channel as well. There's my website. There's so much, and there's lots of free content out there from me, lots of videos, lots of blog posts and webinars and resources. So feel free to use everything I've got out there for free and never buy anything off me. That is so okay with me, because
I love your generosity.
Look, I do what I do to make a difference. So if it helps someone, then I'm a happy lady.
Amazing.
And also, don't be afraid of buying Leah's best-selling books, you know. There's always that.
Of course. Thank you so much, Leah. Everything you just said, you just represent every time you have a conversation with us. And thank you for your generosity and sharing your knowledge with our listeners today. And yeah, thanks again. We'll see you all next week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.